The frozen fields stretched endlessly under gray December skies. Snow muffled every sound except the distant rumble of approaching death. Three massive German tanks rolled forward through the mist. Behind them marched seasoned SS infantry, men who had butchered prisoners just days before. Standing between them and victory was one American soldier, 19 years old, armed with whatever weapons he could scavenge. Most would have fled. He planted his feet and prepared to fight. This is the story of how terror turned backward, how fear found a new target, how one teenager became the nightmare that haunted Hitler's most elite division. The enemy expected easy passage across a small Belgian bridge. Instead, they discovered something that defied all logic. A single defender who moved like smoke, who struck from everywhere at once, who turned their certainty into doubt. By the time the shooting stopped, 3 tanks lay burning in the snow. Elite troops had retreated into the forest, and Francis Sherman Curry had rewritten the rules of warfare forever. The German war machine rolled through Europe with terrifying efficiency. Tank divisions crushed resistance. Infantry swept aside defenders. Victory followed victory with mechanical precision. But in December 1944, that machine met an immovable object on a narrow bridge outside Malmedy. What happened there changed everything. Not just for one battle, not just for one campaign, but for the entire course of World War II. Winter 1944 brought false hope to Allied commanders. German forces seemed broken, retreating on all fronts. The war appeared nearly finished. Families prepared for homecomings. Soldiers talked of Christmas back home. Hitler had other plans. His final gamble would shatter the quiet, turn victory into desperate survival, transform a peaceful sector into hell on earth. The Ardennes forest had been nicknamed the Ghost Front, a place where exhausted units went to rest, where green replacements learned their trade, where nothing ever happened. That reputation died at dawn on December 16th. 200,000 German soldiers erupted from the snow-covered hills. Nearly 1,000 tanks and assault guns followed. The surprise was total. The devastation immediate. American lines crumbled like paper. Leading this steel tsunami was Kampfgruppe Peipers, elite Waffen-SS troops commanded by Colonel Joachim Peiper. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were killers who had earned their reputation in the brutal campaigns of Russia. Villages burned in their wake. Civilians disappeared. Nothing remained standing. In Russia, they had been called the blowtorch battalion. Now they brought that same merciless approach to Belgium. Their track record spoke volumes. No prisoners, no mercy, no survivors. On December 17th, near the crossroads town of Bogno, they demonstrated their methods. Over 100 American artillery observers surrendered after running out of ammunition. Disarmed prisoners were herded into a snow-covered field. They expected transport to prison camps. Instead came the chatter of machine guns. 81 Americans died in that field, shot down like animals, left bleeding in the snow. Some survived by playing dead. They crawled away to spread the word. The Malmedy massacre sent shockwaves through every American unit. The message was crystal clear. Surrender meant death. Fight or die. There were no other options. This was the force now bearing down on every defensive position. Seasoned killers with overwhelming firepower. Men who laughed as they murdered prisoners. Troops who had never been stopped by anything. They rolled toward Malmedy with absolute confidence. Another crossroads to capture. Another position to overrun. Another step toward splitting the Allied armies in half. What they found waiting would shatter that confidence forever. The town of Malmedy huddled beneath thick snow. Church bells had fallen silent. Windows stayed shuttered against the bitter cold. Streets lay empty except for the occasional patrol. Yet beneath that peaceful surface, desperate preparations continued. American forces knew what was coming. Radio reports painted a grim picture. Entire battalions overrun. Tank columns punching through defensive lines. The unstoppable advance of Hitler's final offensive. At the edge of town stood a narrow stone bridge, ancient construction that had weathered centuries of conflict. Now it would face its greatest test. Because that bridge controlled everything. Lose the bridge, and German armor would pour through. The entire defensive line would collapse. Thousands of American troops would be cut off, surrounded, destroyed. The bridge had to hold. Standing guard over that vital crossing were scattered elements of the 30th Infantry Division, old Hickory veterans who had fought from Normandy to the German border, tough soldiers who knew their business. But they were spread thin, exhausted, undermanned. Among them was a quiet replacement named Francis Sherman Curry. 19 years old, orphaned at 12, raised in an institution. Nothing in his background suggested heroic potential. He followed orders, kept his mouth shut, did his job. Nobody paid him much attention. Just another fresh-faced kid learning the ropes. The kind of soldier who fades into the background, unremarkable in every way. That was about to change dramatically. December 21st dawned gray and bitter. Fog clung to the frozen fields. Ice coated every surface. The kind of weather that grounded aircraft and favored attackers. Perfect conditions for what was coming. Artillery fire announced the assault. German guns opened with devastating effect. Shells screamed overhead. Explosions tore through defensive positions. The earth shook with each impact. Snow mixed with dirt and smoke. Through that barrage came the sound every defender dreaded. Tank tracks grinding against frozen ground. The mechanical growl of approaching panzers. Death on steel treads. From the mist emerged 3 massive German tanks. Behind them, advanced SS infantry in their distinctive camouflage. Veterans of countless battles. Men who had never been stopped by anything. They moved with practiced confidence toward the bridge. Most of the American defenders fell back toward stronger positions in town. Standard tactics when facing overwhelming odds. Lived to fight another day. Nobody blamed them for withdrawing. Francis Curry stayed put. He watched the enemy column approach through his rifle sights, studied the lead tank commander exposed in his turret, calculated distance and windage, then squeezed the trigger. His Browning automatic rifle barked once. The German officer toppled from view. The tank lurched forward blindly. Its momentum slowed. The entire column hesitated. In that moment of confusion, Curry moved. He sprinted through enemy fire toward a nearby barn. Bullets kicked up snow around his feet. Machine guns tracked his movement. Somehow he reached cover untouched. Inside the barn waited heavier weapons, a bazooka, anti-tank grenades, the tools needed to fight armor. Curry grabbed what he could carry, then stepped back into the open. The lead tank had recovered. It ground forward again, main gun swiveling toward American positions. Curry raised the bazooka, sighted carefully, fired. The rocket streaked through the cold air, struck the tank's hull with tremendous force. Smoke erupted from the impact point. The Panzer shuddered to a halt, its crew trapped inside burning steel. 1 down, 2 to go. The remaining tanks pushed past their burning comrade. SS infantry fanned out across the field. Machine guns chattered. Mortars began dropping shells around the bridge. The full weight of the assault fell on one teenage defender. Curry refused to break. He moved like a ghost through the smoke and snow, appearing here, firing there, vanishing before return fire could find him. To the Germans, he seemed to be everywhere at once. A second tank pressed forward. Curry was ready. Another anti-tank grenade sailed through the air. Another explosion. Another German crew abandoned their burning vehicle. The road began filling with wreckage, but the SS infantry kept coming. Black uniformed figures advancing through the chaos, rifles flashing, submachine guns chattering. They had to be stopped before they reached the bridge. Curry found his answer in an abandoned American half-track. The vehicle was wrecked, but its mounted .50 caliber machine gun remained intact. He swung the heavy weapon toward the attacking infantry. The big gun roared to life. Streams of tracer fire cut through the advancing troops. Germans dove for cover. Their assault wavered. Curry swept the field methodically, cutting down anyone who tried to advance. When the gun overheated, he switched back to his rifle. Precise single shots that found their targets. The SS advance stalled completely. Elite troops who had terrorized Europe now cowered in ditches. Through the smoke and noise, Curry spotted movement near a disabled American vehicle. Wounded soldiers trapped by machine gun fire, unable to move, slowly bleeding to death in the snow. Without hesitation, he left his position, crawled across open ground under heavy fire. Bullets snapped overhead. Explosions erupted nearby. He ignored them all. One by one, he dragged the wounded to safety. 5 men pulled from certain death. Each rescue more dangerous than the last. Each time he returned to help another comrade. Only when all 5 were safe did he return to the fight. Back to the machine gun. Back to holding the bridge. Back to defying an entire SS battalion with nothing but determination. The battle raged for hours. German commanders grew increasingly frustrated. They were being held up by what seemed like an entire company of defenders. Coordinated fire from multiple positions. Professional resistance that anticipated every move. They had no way of knowing the truth. One 19-year-old orphan was destroying their attack single-handed. Moving so fast between positions that he seemed like many men. Fighting with such skill that veteran SS troops believed they faced elite opposition. Tank after tank was disabled or destroyed. Infantry assault after infantry assault was beaten back. The bridge remained firmly in American hands. And Francis Sherman Curry continued to stand his ground. As dawn broke fully over the battlefield, the German attack finally faltered. Surviving tanks pulled back into the forest. Infantry retreated to regroup. The road to Malmedy remained blocked by American resistance. Curry stood among the wreckage of his victory. Smoke curled up from burning vehicles. German and American bodies lay scattered in the snow. The bridge behind him was scarred but intact. 3 German tanks destroyed. Dozens of enemy soldiers killed or wounded. An entire SS battalion thrown back in confusion. All by one teenager with a handful of weapons and unlimited courage. The Waffen-SS had met their match. Elite troops who specialized in terror had encountered something that terrified them. A defender who could not be broken, could not be intimidated, could not be stopped. Word of the stand at Malmedy spread through American units like wildfire. Soldiers whispered in amazement. How had one man held against such odds? How had a teenage replacement defeated Hitler's best troops? At first, nobody believed the reports. It had to be a squad action, maybe a platoon, certainly not the work of a single soldier. But witnesses confirmed the impossible truth. Francis Curry had fought alone. His company commander immediately recommended him for the Medal of Honor. The citation described extraordinary heroism under overwhelming enemy fire, actions that went far beyond the call of duty. valor that saved countless American lives. The recommendation moved quickly up the chain of command. Each level added their endorsement. This was clearly a case deserving the nation's highest military decoration. No question about it. On July 27, 1945, near Reims in France, Major General Leland Hobbs presented Francis Sherman Curry with the Medal of Honor. He was only 20 years old, the youngest recipient in the European theater. The ceremony was repeated later in Washington with full military honors. President Truman himself praised Curry's actions, called him an inspiration to all Americans, a symbol of what free men could accomplish when properly motivated. Alongside the Medal of Honor came other decorations: Silver Star for gallantry, Bronze Star for meritorious service, 3 Purple Hearts for wounds received in action, Belgium's Order of Leopold for Allied cooperation. His uniform chest bore the ribbons of extraordinary valor. Yet Curry himself remained uncomfortable with the attention. He had only done his job, protected his fellow soldiers, held his assigned position. Nothing more. General Eisenhower reportedly said that Curry's actions shortened the war by 6 weeks. High praise from the Supreme Allied Commander. Recognition that one soldier's courage had strategic impact beyond imagination. For the men who served beside him, the meaning was more personal. Those 5 wounded soldiers owed their lives to his bravery. The battalion avoided encirclement because he held the bridge. They went home because one teenager refused to quit. His name became legend in military circles. The stand at Malmedy was studied at staff colleges. Tactical lessons were drawn from his improvised defense. How one man could accomplish what seemed impossible. But Curry never sought the spotlight that followed him. When reporters wanted interviews, he declined. When Hollywood came calling, he said no. Fame held no appeal for the quiet hero from New York. After the war ended, he chose civilian life over military career. No parades or speaking tours, no political ambitions or business opportunities based on his reputation. He simply wanted to go home and build a normal life. He worked at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Albany, counseling other soldiers struggling with their own demons. Later, he started a landscaping business, then moved into hotel convention planning. Ordinary jobs for an extraordinary man. To his neighbors and co-workers, he was just frank, quiet, reliable, hard-working. They knew about his medals, of course, but he never talked about the war, never traded on his fame, never acted like anything special. The world remembered even if he preferred to forget. His story appeared in military histories. War memoirs mentioned his heroics. The Battle of the Bulge could not be told without including Malmedy. He became the first Medal of Honor recipient immortalized as a G.I. Joe action figure. Children played with toys based on his likeness. Video games recreated his famous stand. Popular culture kept his memory alive. Yet Francis Curry himself remained stubbornly private. When asked about his actions, he said he was just doing his job, protecting his buddies, holding his ground because someone had to. Nothing heroic about it. He lived quietly until his death in 2019 at age 94. A long life well lived. A peaceful ending for a man who had seen too much violence. But his legacy lived on in the hearts of those he saved. More than medals or monuments, his story teaches eternal lessons. About courage under fire. About doing what's right regardless of odds. About the power of individual action in decisive moments. At Malmedy, he proved that sometimes one person really can make the difference. That heroism isn't about size or strength or training. It's about standing firm when everything tells you to run. About fighting back when defeat seems certain. The Waffen-SS learned that lesson the hard way. Elite troops who had terrorized Europe discovered something more frightening than their own reputation. A defender who would not yield, could not be broken, would not surrender. They came expecting another easy victory. Instead, they found their worst nightmare. A teenager who fought like an army, who turned their own tactics against them, who made them afraid. Francis Sherman Curry didn't just hold a bridge that December morning. He held the line between freedom and tyranny, between hope and despair, between victory and defeat. One man against the darkness. And when the smoke cleared, the darkness had been pushed back. The bridge still stood. The town remained free. The war continued toward its inevitable conclusion. All because a 19-year-old orphan refused to quit. That is why his name echoes through history. Why his story still inspires new generations of soldiers. Why the stand at Malmedy will never be forgotten. Some battles are won by armies, others by the will of a single man. On December 21, 1944, Francis Sherman Curry proved that one person with enough courage can indeed change the world. The ghost of Malmedy, the boy who fought like a legion, the teenager who terrified the SS and saved the day.